Welcome to Not on the Lesson Plan. This is a podcast for the movers, shakers, and misfits in education, helping you understand that education isn't just one path. And I'm on a mission to support teachers with the steps that you can take both in and out of the classroom to support the next generation. This podcast is a reflective podcast where I'm going to be delving into some of the different strategies and tips that I've learned over the 8 years of being both a content creator and decade of being a teacher. So trying to balance everything together, because it's not been perfect. It's not been easy for sure. So I've had to take various different steps to ensure that I've been able to do both at the same time to support me with building an audience of just over 300,000. I recently followed some advice of someone on social media who is in a completely different niche, and you add up the different followings that you have on different social media pages to kind of quantify the impact that you have. And although not all of the platforms and individuals that follow my account, I don't think they're all active, definitely. It's still a bit of a testament. At some point, people have gone, cool, yeah, I know I then trust the content enough to follow this person, which is a huge source of motivation that I feel that I need on this Monday morning of filming this podcast, because it has definitely been something that I found challenging. And actually, the piece of content that I found most challenging to create recently is, and I come close to the camera at this point, it is this podcast. This podcast is such a time-consuming process. It's rewarding. It's great that I know that I'm able to get these stories out there and these tips in a long-form format, but it is such a time drain. And whether we change to a once every 2 week schedule at some point to make sure that there's a balance going, I don't know, but this episode is not about that. It's about telling you the different steps that I've been able to take over the years to be consistent. So we're not at this stage going to be dropping down, but maybe a different podcast episode that has a different tone. We look at that, because what's really important about being both a teacher and a content creator, both of those things can suck infinite amounts of time from you. As a teacher, I always talk about this thing called infinity pools. See, I like to start my podcast by giving immediate value. Teaching is an infinity pool. An infinity pool is, you see that pool that meets the water, and it's that infinite amount of water. But there is an edge. There is an edge to what you can do as a teacher. And if you don't realize what that edge is, then you will fall off the infinity pool. Can you fall off an infinity pool? We'll go with it. You'll burn out, you'll crash out. And it's really important that as a teacher, you recognize your cutoff point. And the exact same thing can be said about content creation. There is always another piece of content that I can create, plan, edit, maybe adapt, think about different ways of doing an email of some sort. But over the 8 years of being a content creator, I've had to realize that both, with content and teaching, you have to have that break. You have to have that pause. So it's been 8 years, but it's been 8 years of making things, experimenting, playing and failing. Failing. I feel like that should be a word. Failing is a word. Playing? I want to bring those two words together, play and failing. Bring it together to essentially be, experimentation. That's still a word. I feel like that is a real kind of sense of what I've done as a content creator over the years. I've experimented, I've played, I've made loads of mistakes, and it really puts me in a great position to help other teachers who perhaps want to use content as a source for building a business, or even just to do similar to what I'm doing now and help other teachers with their teaching. Because I feel like we're at a really challenging point with education in general, where other teachers look to other individuals for sources of confidence and information. And if you're interested in that process, I definitely want to support you with that. I'm going to be doing more personal brand webinars and other webinars in general over on Eventbrite and Zoom type things. The people that will find out first are the individuals that are on my mailing list, so make sure you check that out. The best way to sign up is to go through my website, teachtraveltriumph.com. I'll probably be putting it on my social media at some point as well to talk about the different webinars. I'll be doing a webinar on personal branding and some other webinars to support with other things as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I really look forward to delving into things. And yeah, let's delve into my journey. My journey as a content creator. I want to try and talk about the steps that I took to start off with, where I went with things, and yeah, how things haven't been perfect, how things haven't been easy. if you are listening at the moment and you feel like dropping me a message of support in regards to this podcast, as I've mentioned, it's been really challenging. I'm currently meant to be on a day of supply teaching, but to try and balance this out and to try and make this consistent, I'm foregoing the teaching at the moment to do the podcast, which is a really strange, big risk to take. Will I continue to do that? No, I had a day of supply teaching last week. It just kind of depends on how things fall. But it is definitely something that I'm trying to balance more up. So feel free to send me a message of support, whether it's through the emails, whether it's through Instagram, LinkedIn are the most likely ones that I'm going to be likely to reply to. Feel free to do that. It really does fill me with a lot of confidence and support. I've had such lovely messages so far from people saying they're listening on their walks and stuff like that, which is really cool. It's very similar to what I do with podcasts as well, is listen to them while I'm on walk. Sometimes I'll do that with YouTube videos. I'll play a YouTube video, put it in my pocket and go for a walk. So my journey started as a teacher in the UK. I taught for 2 years in the UK, and as part of that, in the second year, I found myself just really, A, lonely, B, just working non-stop. If you put a book, marking was my biggest challenge. If you put 30 books in front of me, there's that law called Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law essentially means that you will do a task in the amount of time that you set it. So for example, if you say, I'm going to mark this set of books this evening, it can take you the whole evening because you've not defined the time. And that was exactly the same for me, because I just take books home. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll just mark those this evening. And essentially, I'd just spend the whole evening marking 30 books when I knew in the back of my head I could do that in an hour. So content for me gave me an additional thing that I had to do. I knew that I had to take my teaching hat off and essentially, at some point, put my content hat on. Should I have picked a niche that was perhaps not teaching? Maybe, because I've gone from teaching to talking about teaching and creating something about teaching. In some ways, that can still lead to burnout, especially if you're not aligned with that. But what's nice about content is you are in control of that, and you can talk about different things. And it might be lifestyle things, it might be various other things that you're able to just talk about. You're in control of your own content, essentially. So it balances out. But yeah, if you are interested in perhaps a different niche, I feel like that would help and support with not burning out in ways that I have in the past. Because when I've been creating for 8 years, it hasn't been 8 years non-stop. I've tried to create content every single day for the last 8 years. I've been able to do a really, really good job of that 90% of the time. But there have, of course, been times where I've had to take this step back for big reasons like weddings and honeymoons, and smaller reasons such as, I suppose it's not a small reason, personal well-being. But when I created my first bits of content, I kind of had a mindset of, I knew that my head teacher would be pretty cool with it. He was cool with most things, but I had a feeling that my deputy perhaps would be a bit more weary, perhaps not supportive. And I think I adopted the mindset of apologizing is often easier than asking for permission. And I just created, knowing that A, children would watch the content, and B, my deputy would also watch the content. And I was really reserved, really cautious about what I posted to start off with. And I am really lucky that my deputy was in full support, because I was making it for the class that I created content for in the first place. My advice would be to have that difficult conversation earlier rather than later. I'm really lucky that as part of creating that first piece of content, I had that conversation with my deputy, and they were like, okay, yeah, this is amazing. Really love what you created. Just be cautious about X, Y, Z. I think it was things like, obviously, not creating and showcasing children's faces and things like that. Of course, different rules have changed over time depending on different schools that you go into. And yeah, the rules 8 years ago were different, are different to what they would be now, because content creation has become a lot more prevalent. It is now seen as a career for many, and it's just now, thinking about it, the tip that I would give you is to make sure that you have that discussion, because it makes things a lot easier later on. Right now, I know of several teachers in several areas, some, for example, such as Scotland, who are having a real tough time with content creation. They're not allowed to create content both before or after the school day in their classroom. It's just not something that they're allowing. Is it something that I agree with? I don't think so, because there once existed something called Teachers TV, and that's how I learned teaching, through Teachers TV, and that was very much essentially content creation in the classroom, but during school time. And that's how I learned. And I think that many teachers in universities now will look for social media posts to support them with their teaching tips, teaching ideas. It's just a new form of CPD, but I feel like that's a bit of a sidetrack. When I started my content creation journey, I had no plan. When I look at my personal branding webinar, one thing that I would say is to have a bit more of a plan of your ideal individual, your avatar, if you like. That's the name. That's not the blue people. That's the name you call your ideal person that you're speaking to. So I'm speaking to an avatar right now. I've got someone in my mind, and I'll talk about who that person is that I've got in my mind that I'm talking to right now. You should have some sort of avatar, someone that you're speaking to, because otherwise the words get lost and it kind of goes off track. But I didn't have anything. Like I said, I was playing and failing. Didn't have a brand identity. I didn't have a specific niche. I didn't do any market research in terms of what people would like, although you could maybe say that talking to my class was market research. I just simply posted what would have helped me 2 years ago. And that has and probably always will be my avatar, is talking to myself 2 years ago and trying to create the content that he would have found useful. So you'll notice that a lot of the content, the year 6 SATs videos were useful for my year 6 class back then, but it was also useful for me as a year 6 teacher for the first time to look at those. When I started eventually creating other bits of content, it was useful to me at that point 2 years ago. So I always try the vlogs are kind of, this is how I'm finding things. But when I try and create my advice videos, my tutorial videos, they are useful to Thomas 2 years ago or at some specific point. And I think that is the most powerful way to start, because you can almost guarantee that regardless of the problem that you have, other people will have that problem too. So you will find that you're able to build an audience, an identity based on helping you 2 years ago, because you will go through very similar journeys to what other people go through too. For example, if you're a trainee teacher right now and you're listening to this and you're having a challenging time with the teacher training, it's a similar journey to what so many other people go through. But by helping you with the teacher training 2 years ago, you're also helping so many other people that are going through teacher training just in general. So thankfully, my deputy gave almost like a bit of a green light to go with things. And I was really grateful for it. And ultimately, that's what happened, is I started creating content. Some of the content to start off with was Dubai focused, because I've been on holiday and wanted to just sort of share those stories and bits and pieces like that. It was great for me to get started with editing. My SAT videos, I was really lucky. They were quite popular. Of course, I made it for my class, but I started seeing comments from people all around the UK, little year 6 children who were watching the videos the night before the exam and putting comments like, this really helped me sleep. And it was like a really relieving feeling of, okay, I'm on the right tracks. I'm doing something cool. I'm actually helping people. And positive feedback, which is why I asked you for those messages in the first place, they are fuel. I am blessed that people, buy into guides and stuff like that I create on my website. But a simple positive message can often be the difference of keeping going with things versus stopping completely. I had a challenging supply teaching day last week, guys, if I'm honest with you. It was quite a tough one. I felt a bit rusty in general, but the class itself it was just a bit tough. A lot of it was to do with me and my initial steps. I lost control fairly quickly and struggled to get control throughout the rest of the day. It's not going to be the class's fault. It was a lot of my fault, but I was like, I'm pretty done with the supply teaching in general. And then I received a lovely message based on a supply teaching moment that I had months ago, and they were like, yeah, you came into our school, we really enjoyed having you. And actually the kind of low-key offered me a job / interview with intent for it, which was bizarre and wild, but it again felt like a huge privilege that was something that was unlocked from those positive messages. And yeah, motivated me again, like, okay, it wasn't that bad, let's get back into supply teaching. But that's essentially the main reason why that's important. But the UAE eventually was somewhere that I moved to. I decided, I've spoken about this, and I'm sure I will speak about this in other podcasts. I eventually moved to the UAE for different personal reasons, lonely, wanting some change, etc. But the new environment was, it was something that I struggled with initially. I went from being a year 6 teacher with a large class to suddenly only having, I think it was 18, 19 children, but in year 2, it was such a huge jump downwards that I initially struggled. So that kind of paused me in my tracks with content creation. And yeah, I wasn't really kind of sure on what to do with content at that point. I was no longer helping my year 6 classes. I was in Dubai, but I wasn't sure on a lot of the processes, so I couldn't talk about it. And I felt like me 2 years ago would have been in the UK, so I didn't really know who to talk to at that point. So I didn't really create as much content. However, I did have to do one thing, and that is build everything from scratch. I had to start basically doing everything again. I was really lucky with the people that I met, and I started to speak about, I've been building this really cool thing. I think when I've moved out to Dubai, I had about 400 subscribers on YouTube, which is a lot. It was a good amount back then to be able to say that. To now say that it's in the tens of thousands is crazy, obviously, that through that journey. But yeah, I was really passionate about it and dedicated to it. At that point, it was just me, myself, and I creating content, and I was trying to create a bit of a process to allow me to generate content. I had really good discussions again. I think actually part of the reason I got my job teaching in Dubai was because I was a content creator. I've not really spoken about this that much, but I had a job interview, and as part of that job interview, I had to send a video of myself, like a film video of me teaching. And GDPR was just kind of starting to come into fruition, and essentially it was like, no, we're not going to let you send a whole video of you teaching with the children on. So thankfully, because I'd been starting to do a bit of video editing, I figured out that you can. It's not splice. You can remove the video. Nowadays, this is really simple stuff. But back then, I was like, oh, that's really cool. Remove the video, but keep the audio track. And because I just had the audio track, I would put like captions of what was happening in the video over the top. And because it was that technologically advanced kind of back then, it was like, okay, yeah, this guy's quite innovative with his stuff, which is, I like to think, still true to this day. But it essentially allowed me to get my job, and it developed a really cool initial relationship with my, again, deputy head at that school. And a lot of the videos that I started off creating when I taught that year 2 class were experiments that me and him kind of put together. We'd be like, right, well, I've read this book. I think there's a Paul Dick's behavior management book, and I've heard about this strategy. What I want you to do is I want you to try it and make a video throughout the week of how you found it. You can still find these videos on my page, by the way, if you go back several years. And I would experiment. I'd try these different things, and I would essentially make the video throughout the week. And then when it got to the weekend, that would be my editing time. So essentially, what I started to do was just record videos at the start of the day and at the end of the day. I didn't have any time throughout the day to talk about things and to create content. Obviously, busy with teaching. But that was the process. I would use that end of the day when kind of everyone was going home, and at the start, before people would get there, to just try and create those bits of content. So you have to try and find those pockets of time. In addition to that, my commute initially to work was about 25 to 30 minutes because I was living a bit further out. That was such amazing headspace. I would often listen to nothing on the way to work. I would just sit in my own headspace thinking about how I could create and be creative with things. And I would just really get invested into that creative process. And that, without saying it was a system, was essentially my system. I would just create content, but based on whatever ideas I kind of had in the morning. And that's the truth. The simple content will always win. Nowadays, now that I have a following, it's sometimes a bit of a trap because I think, right, I've got lots of people who are going to see my content and they're going to want X, Y, Z, and they're going to want this standard of production, etc. And it holds me back. Whereas when I started off with creating content, I kind of didn't really, I did care. I cared a lot, but I think perhaps I had a bit of a naivety with my content that I would just kind of go with things. Whatever ideas I had in my head, I would just create it and post it. And that was particularly true with YouTube. I don't think you can just do that with YouTube though. You have to edit the videos, so you do really need to think of things as you're creating them. But eventually, while I was teaching in Dubai, TikTok and short form social media became more and more prevalent. And that was almost after online learning period. I was blown away by short form content creation. And the simple content really was the winner on there. I went from this type of video that is going to need to, I'm going to have to edit this for the next 3 hours after I film this, to being able to go like, okay, here's 3 tips on moving to Dubai. Number 1, make sure you think about XYZ. Number 2, make sure you think about your passport validity. Number 3, and like I could create a video in a minute, post it, and I'd be getting tens of thousands of views, which completely blew my mind and kind of shook my content principle about a little bit, because I was like, well, I'm making all these videos, it's taking me ages on YouTube, why am I even bothering if TikTok can do that in X amount of time? Ultimately, I build more relationship on YouTube and podcasts than something like TikTok, because it's very doom scrolly, which is why I'm still kind of depending on and enjoying this more at the moment. But I think it's true that the simple content is the content that is going to win the most. My biggest tip: consistency. Consistency is going to be every single type of personality, the formulas, the editing. Being consistent and having a place where you can show up time and time again is the key thing. And I think the main crux, the main way that I want to give you value in this podcast is by talking about ways that I've been able to be consistent. Because if it doesn't have to be a specific time and day, but people want to see content more regularly. And I'm hoping that with this podcast, I'm able to continue doing that. I will have breaks at points, and I'll be formal about that, thinking Christmas time at this point. But being consistent with it is really quite key. Also, consistency is also based on the content that you produce as well. And I think that's something I've not been so good at over the last kind of couple of years. Consistency is, right, what is your topic? And you're going to talk about that over and over again for however many years. So make sure that the content and topic that you choose is something that you're going to enjoy. Otherwise, yeah, your consistency won't be there. I don't just mean that you have to create content every single day. That doesn't matter. But if one day you create a video about pink ponies, and then another day you create videos about dolphins, but then the next day you create videos about teaching, people don't know where to follow. Whereas if you follow and you just create content about teaching every single day, teachers are going to follow you. So that's really important. So a few different tips that I've had over the years to support me with my content. I spoke a little bit about using the time outside of teaching. I was privileged eventually with teaching in Dubai that I had my half day on a Friday. Half day on a Friday was a dream, because the remainder of the day on Friday, in fact, I say that I eventually had it. I basically had finish at 1/2 o'clock most Fridays, which would then give me 2-3 hours to either flesh out content for planning or to start to create other things like products and other types of videos and bits and pieces like that. But having a specific time that you have in the back of your head that you're going to be like, right, that is my content time, is completely key. And without that time, you will get lost in the process, because life happens. Everything happens except the content, unless you set that time aside to ensure that you do it. I also had a bit of a content template. The template was essentially different bits of content, especially on YouTube. You'll see that I've got, when I start this podcast, you'll see the little intro and the music. That's a template that I'll put this video into, and I can just copy things across. Again, that saves significant amount of time. It's a little bit hard to do with the short form content, but when you start to do things over and over again, and you are able to kind of create a bit of a routine, you know that you use XYZ, and that's almost the brand template in the back of your head, that as you're creating, you know exactly where to tap to be faster. And okay, it's saving you milliseconds, microseconds, but those seconds add up over time, and it allows you to be more consistent with what you create. My next tip would be having some sort of rhythm. I was recently privileged, when I taught in the UAE, to go to TikTok HQ. And as part of that journey to TikTok HQ, they spoke about different ways to be consistent with content. A lot of the people who were there at the time were individuals who created content, but also had a job on the side. There was one person who was a dentist, another person who was also a teacher, but creating in a different niche, and like a therapist of some sorts. But they all had content as their kind of side bit. So we were talking about things to help with being a bit more consistent. The individual actually from TikTok said that you should really follow a bit of an 80-20 or almost a 90-10 principle of 90% of the time you should be following a specific type of content that you know works, and then your 20%, 10% of the time you're experimenting. So I knew as a template, then I knew specific times where I should post content. I've always been pretty consistent on either a Monday or a Tuesday. Say consistent and then say either Monday or Tuesday. Back then it was on a Monday I'm going to post YouTube videos. That is YouTube day. Post on a Monday, and the rest of the day is kind of exploratory. On a Saturday, that would be my vlog day. So when you see a day in the life of a primary school teacher in Dubai, that was always filmed on a Friday, because the Friday I knew that I'd probably do the most interesting stuff on a Friday afternoon, whereas the other days were perhaps just busy. I knew that most of the interesting stuff would happen on a Friday, and it was just a little bit easier to manage. So you find the day that is going to be easiest for you to manage. It might be, if you're a teacher in the UK, that there's a specific PPA day that you have, and you know that that day is going to be key and crucial for you to create content in XYZ ways. The reason this is great is because it kind of lifts that decision fatigue. You know that you're going to be creating content about something on a Monday, and you'll probably have something in a bit of a list, and we'll talk about lists in a second. Friday is going to be my vlog day. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I would have, like, Wednesday is 3 somethings. Tuesday is this versus that. It's just about having the different ideas in the back of your head. Okay, what am I doing? This versus that. UK versus UAE curriculum. The curriculum in the UAE has these subjects. The curriculum in the UK has these subjects. It's just having those formats in the back of your head. Sometimes we speak about them and we call them content pillars. When I do my consultancy now, I speak to different brands and I say it's really crucial for you to have your content pillars. Those things that you know you can post and that they perform well as well. It's really important that you're not just posting things that are not going to develop your motivation because they're not reaching the right people. So with one of the brands that I talk to at the moment, we speak about specific things, key dates, certain news related things. So I won't name their content pillars, but they know their content pillars. I know their content pillars, so that when it's specific days, we're able to share that, and we start to develop. And it takes time to develop these things, but you develop these sort of ideas where you're able to kind of create systems for specific days. So let's talk about notes then. Having notes is key. Like I said, you can't type and text on the road, obviously, but as I mentioned, when I had those commutes in the morning, those 20, 25, sometimes it would go up to 45-minute commutes, I'd like to spend a lot of that time in silence until it was kind of like 5 minutes towards the end of, getting to work, and then I needed some sort of motivational music to get me through the day. Besides the point, I would generate loads of different ideas in my head, and having some sort of notes app to support you with that is really good. Nowadays, I'm able to utilize artificial intelligence. So I'll type some ideas out in my head, and then when it comes to planning phases of things like this podcast, I will just sit down and I'll speak at AI for probably quite a while, almost like a mini podcast. And then I'll say, right, based on my jumbled ideas, kind of map it out and create a bit of an outline from that. And now it does a really good job. But in the past, I've just had a running list. I've still got multiple running lists. I've got my next 10 episodes already considered. Whether I go with them based on what comes up in the future, I'm not sure. But I have 10 episodes that I've already built up in my mind that I'm going to go with. Talking about building things up, one of the single biggest tips that I would give any teacher or busy professional who's interested in creating content is to create a bank of content. So right now, one of the reasons I'm struggling with the podcast is that I don't have a bank of content. I'm creating content day or week by week. However, when I created in Dubai, I would create a few videos. It wasn't bulk creating it. They weren't all ready to go. But I knew that if something came up in the week where I was busy and I wasn't able to get to the content, I knew that I would have, and I use my quotation marks here, one in the bank, so that I'm not able to film something, filming conditions aren't quite right, the lighting's not quite right, something's come up, but I have a piece of content that I can edit, put together and put out there, especially when it comes to YouTube where it's a little bit more cumbersome. Having one in the bank is essential. The reason I don't like bulk creating content is because I find that it's very easy to forget what you've created. Some people will be like, I've got all these different things mapped out. It depends what type of person you are. You might find that straightforward. For me personally, whenever I've built creative content in the past, I end up creating content that I end up forgetting about. So I like to try and create content organically. It means that you're not able to miss topics. You can stay on top of things. But on the flip side, the kind of perfect medium is having content that's almost evergreen and quote unquote in the bank so that you can quickly come to those if you need it. Batching content is something that people do find useful. I sort of do it if I know I've got a series of different things that I'm creating. So right now I'm doing 25 days of EdTech over on Instagram. I'm on day 7 at the moment, but it's actually day 8. So I know that based on the busy week that I've got coming up ahead, I need to create 4 or 5 of them today while I've got the time, so that I've got those quote unquote in the bank when I get to my busier times later on this week. I'm not sure if you call that batch content because it's not scheduled. You might call it that though, I suppose. Over the years, building has been the hardest part of creating the content. One of my most viral pieces of content eventually came while it was online learning time, and I just went, right, loads of teachers aren't going to know how to use technology, so I'm going to spend all of this time building tutorials and bits and pieces to support teachers with understanding that. To do that, I used YouTube, and it worked really well. I was able to share content on platforms like Facebook groups to get those tutorials out there. And another tip that I would give teachers is to utilize and to almost create your own community. The earlier that you can create a community and use call to actions to build your community, the more reassuring it will be for you. It's the hardest thing to create content, post it, and to hear nothing back. I still have it today, where I'll be creating content on certain social media platforms. It is a really challenging concept to go through and to kind of do, is to create content to an audience that aren't necessarily listening, because it's just exhausting. So I would definitely say to try and develop your own community, whether it's using tools like Facebook groups, whether it's posting onto Facebook groups to get your content out there initially. But that has been almost one of the big keys for me developing my content over the years, and I would say it's probably one of the reasons why my content went viral initially, is using Facebook groups. But that would be another big tip that I would give you, and it would help you with your motivation too. I also want to say that it's not been easy. There have been plenty of times where I have dropped the ball over the years because different things have come up. Whether it's been content hasn't been quite right and I've had to take it down and review it for my own personal sanity, or whether it's been different life events have happened and I've had to just kind of take a pause. Sometimes the summer holidays, although it should be one of the easiest times to create because you've got that time available to actually create the content, it can actually be the hardest time because you're still trying to catch up with family, trying to make sure you get all the life jobs done, and your head isn't in that kind of work hard, that kind of rigid mindset. You're a bit more flexible with things. That's when I find it quite hard, and I've dropped the ball with there sometimes too. But the most important thing then is that the results that I've had through my social media have come from the tiny, small things that I've been privileged to do over the years. And if you're considering it yourself, it would be that. Just making sure that you are doing the thing and remembering that done is better than perfect rather than overthinking it. If you have any questions about the journey that I've been through, please feel free to send me a message, to leave a comment, anything along those lines. I want to try and build up a bit of a bank of questions that at the end of the podcast I answer over the time. And that would be really, really good to do. This is just a quick one that my content right now is not sponsored. I don't have sponsors on this podcast, so instead I want to try and signpost you towards the content that I have on my website. I've got loads of different free videos on my website, teachtraveltriumph.com, to support you with both teaching, entrepreneurialism, teaching abroad. I also have different free blogs, but there's also guides available on there too. So if you want to go and check those out, please feel free to. It really helps me out, helps with what I'm creating here on the podcast and other places, and it's a real privilege to be able to support this amazing community. So thank you very much for supporting me with this. Remember that what we're doing here is not on the lesson plan. See you in the next one. Until then, I'm out.